Your history textbook gave the Rockefellers maybe 2 pages. A photograph of John D. Rockefeller looking stern. A paragraph about Standard Oil. A sentence about philanthropy. Then you turned the page and moved on to the next chapter. That was by design. Because if you actually understood what the Rockefeller family built, how they built it, and how it still operates today, you would see the modern world completely differently. You would recognize their fingerprints on institutions you interact with every single day. You would understand why certain ideas dominate public discourse while others are dismissed as fringe. You would see the invisible architecture that shapes your life. Over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you 20 secrets your history books deliberately hid. Not theories, not speculation. Exposed facts that historians, journalists, and researchers have documented for decades, but that somehow never made it into the curriculum you were taught. By the end of this video, the name Rockefeller will mean something very different to you than it does right now. Let's begin. If you're new here, this channel exposes the hidden architecture of global power. Subscribe now, because what you're about to learn changes how you see everything. Secret number 1. John D. Rockefeller's father was a literal con artist who taught his son that the world exists to be exploited. William Avery Rockefeller traveled under fake names, sold fraudulent cancer cures to desperate patients, was indicted for rape, abandoned his family for years at a time, and maintained a secret second family under an assumed identity until his death. He once bragged that he cheated his own sons whenever possible to make them sharp. Young John didn't reject his father's worldview. He systematized it. He applied con artistry at industrial scale, understanding from childhood that marks exist to be fleeced and that morality is just a story the powerful tell the weak. Secret number 2. Standard Oil didn't win through superior products or efficiency. It won through a scheme so corrupt that it would be considered racketeering today. Rockefeller negotiated secret deals with railroads called rebates. The railroads charged his competitors higher shipping rates, then paid Rockefeller a percentage of what his competitors paid. He was literally profiting every time his competition shipped oil. When competitors discovered the scheme and tried to ship by alternative routes, Rockefeller bought the alternative routes. When they tried to build their own refineries, he used predatory pricing to bankrupt them, then bought their assets for pennies. By 1879, he controlled 90% of American oil refining. This wasn't capitalism. This was economic warfare designed to eliminate the possibility of competition. Secret number 3. The 1911 Supreme Court decision that supposedly broke up Standard Oil actually made Rockefeller 3 times richer. When Standard Oil was split into 34 companies, Rockefeller received proportional stock in all 34. Before the breakup, he was worth approximately $300 million. Within 2 years, as the individual company's stock prices soared without the antitrust stigma, his net worth exceeded $900 million. The companies that emerged from this breakup include ExxonMobil, Chevron, and BP America, which still dominate global energy today. The punishment was a reward. The dissolution was a multiplication. Your textbook called this a victory for antitrust. It was actually a masterclass in how to use regulation to consolidate wealth. Secret number 4. The Rockefeller Foundation was created specifically as a reputation laundering operation after one of the deadliest anti-labor massacres in American history. In April 1914, the Colorado National Guard attacked a tent colony of striking workers at Rockefeller-owned coal mines in Ludlow. They set fire to the tents. Women and children burned alive. The public backlash was unprecedented. For the first time, the Rockefeller name was associated with murder rather than success. Within months, the family hired Ivy Lee, the father of modern public relations, whose explicit strategy was to flood the public with stories of charitable giving until Rockefeller meant generosity rather than violence. The foundation that supposedly represents Rockefeller benevolence was born directly from the need to make America forget burning children. Secret number 5. Rockefeller philanthropy deliberately destroyed alternative medicine in America and created the pharmaceutical industry as we know it. In 1910, the Rockefeller Foundation funded the Flexner Report, which examined medical education across the country. The report's recommendations were used to close medical schools teaching homeopathy, naturopathy, herbal medicine, and other non-pharmaceutical approaches. Within 2 decades, American medicine was standardized around pharmaceutical intervention and surgical procedures. This wasn't coincidental. The Rockefellers had just acquired major stakes in pharmaceutical companies. They funded a report that delegitimized their competition, then profited as the only remaining approach to medicine became the one they owned. Your doctor prescribes pills instead of herbs because of decisions made in 1910 to protect Rockefeller investments. Secret number 6. The Rockefeller Foundation's global health campaigns weren't humanitarian. They were calculated investments in labor productivity for Rockefeller-owned industries. The famous hookworm eradication campaign in the American South targeted regions where Rockefeller Industries needed healthy workers. Internal foundation documents discuss health interventions explicitly in terms of increasing worker output and economic productivity. The same pattern repeated globally. Countries receiving Rockefeller health funding were countries where Rockefeller oil interests needed stable governments and productive workforces. Philanthropy wasn't separate from business strategy. It was an extension of it, using public health as a tool to optimize human capital for extraction. Secret number 7. The Federal Reserve System was designed at a secret meeting of bankers representing Rockefeller and Morgan interests, held at a private island club to avoid public scrutiny. In November 1910, 6 men representing approximately 1/4 of the world's wealth gathered at Jekyll Island, Georgia. They traveled under fake names. They told the press they were going duck hunting. Over 9 days, they designed what would become the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve is not actually part of the federal government. It's a hybrid institution with private ownership. The regional Federal Reserve banks are owned by private member banks with deep historical ties to the same families who designed the system. Your textbook presents the Fed as a government institution. It was created by private bankers, for private bankers, at a secret meeting on a private island. Secret number 8. The Council on Foreign Relations, which has supplied virtually every Secretary of State and CIA director for the past century, was founded with Rockefeller money and chaired by David Rockefeller for 15 years. The CFR isn't where foreign policy is debated. It's where foreign policy is decided before it reaches the public debate stage. When you vote for president, you're choosing between candidates whose foreign policy advisors were pre-selected from the same CFR membership pool. The appearance of choice masks the continuity of policy. Democrat or Republican, the faces change, but the advisors come from the same institution, funded by the same family, operating according to the same frameworks established a century ago. Secret number 9. The United Nations headquarters sits on 18 acres of Manhattan real estate donated by John D. Rockefeller Jr. in 1946, and the family maintained outsized influence over the organization's development and direction. Every world leader who enters the UN General Assembly walks on Rockefeller ground. This isn't metaphor. It's geography. The family didn't just donate land. They shaped the institution's founding vision through organizations like the CFR that supplied early UN leadership. When you see the UN as neutral international territory, you're seeing exactly what the donation was designed to make you see. Secret number 10. The Trilateral Commission, founded by David Rockefeller in 1973, was explicitly designed to coordinate economic and political policy between North America, Europe, and Japan, creating frameworks for globalization that served multinational corporate interests. NAFTA, the WTO, the architecture of the European Union's economic integration, these didn't emerge organically from technological progress and free trade. They were designed. And the designers consistently came from institutions the Rockefellers founded or funded. Globalization isn't something that happened to the world. It's something that was done to the world, and the blueprints were drawn in Rockefeller-funded conference rooms. Halfway through, and you're probably starting to notice a pattern. Not direct control of governments, but control of the institutions that shape what governments consider possible. Subscribe now if you want to understand how this architecture still operates today. We're just getting started. Secret number 11. The Rockefeller family deliberately shaped American education to produce compliant workers rather than independent thinkers, and they stated this goal explicitly in their own documents. The General Education Board, founded by John D. Rockefeller in 1903, spent more money on American education than the federal government did at the time. Frederick Gates, the Rockefeller advisor who ran the board, wrote that they would not try to make students into philosophers or men of learning or science, that the task was simply to train them as they were found to a perfectly ideal life just where they were. The American education system wasn't designed to liberate minds. It was designed to produce workers who would accept their place in an industrial hierarchy without questioning who built that hierarchy or why. Secret number 12. The Rockefeller family's actual wealth has been systematically hidden through trusts, foundations, and corporate structures that make accurate accounting nearly impossible. Estimates range from $11 billion to over $200 billion, depending on how you count assets distributed across hundreds of entities designed specifically to obscure ownership. The family has been publicly giving away their fortune for over a century. They should be broke by now. Instead, the wealth compounds in shadows while the philanthropy generates positive press coverage. You've been watching a magic trick for 100 years and still believing the money disappeared. Secret number 13. The Rockefellers maintained their oil industry influence for decades after the supposed 1911 breakup through networks of board memberships, banking relationships, and coordinated investment strategies that historians call the Rockefeller interest. The Standard Oil successor companies appeared independent but operated in tacit coordination, rarely competing aggressively on price, sharing directors and bankers, investing through the same financial institutions. The monopoly wasn't broken. It was reorganized into a structure that provided the appearance of competition while maintaining the reality of coordination. Your textbook showed you the breakup. It didn't show you what happened next. Secret number 14. The Rockefeller family was instrumental in creating the modern pharmaceutical industry and maintained stakes in major drug companies, while simultaneously funding the medical education system that would make pharmaceuticals the default treatment for virtually every condition. This is vertical integration applied to human health. Fund the research institutions. Shape the medical schools. Own the drug companies. Create a system where doctors are trained to prescribe the products your companies manufacture, and present this entire arrangement as scientific progress rather than market capture. Modern medicine isn't what science discovered was best. It's what Rockefeller investment decided would be profitable. Secret number 15. David Rockefeller openly admitted in his own memoir that he was part of a group working toward a more integrated global political and economic structure, and he expressed no shame about it. In his 2002 autobiography, he wrote that if being part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States and conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure meant he was an internationalist, then he was proud of it. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a direct quote from his own book. He told you exactly what he was doing. Most people never read it because they were told that only paranoid people ask these questions. Secret number 16. The Rockefeller Foundation funded eugenics research in the United States and Germany in the early 20th century, including grants to institutions that would later be connected to Nazi racial hygiene programs. The foundation provided funding to the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Germany, which conducted research used to justify Nazi racial policies. After World War II, this history was quietly buried. The same foundation rebranded its population control interests as family planning and reproductive health, continuing similar goals under more palatable language. Your history book mentions Nazi eugenics. It doesn't mention who funded the research institutions that developed the ideas. Secret number 17. The Rockefellers systematically acquired or neutralized media outlets that criticized their interests while supporting outlets that promoted favorable coverage, creating an information environment where their version of events became the mainstream narrative. By the mid-20th century, Rockefeller Foundation grants supported journalism schools, funded research that shaped journalistic standards, and provided grants to publications that framed issues in ways favorable to foundation interests. David Rockefeller sat on boards alongside executives from CBS, NBC, ABC, The New York Times, The Washington Post, and Time Incorporated. The people who decide what you see on the news sit in the same rooms as the people whose interests they're supposed to investigate. This isn't conspiracy. It's documented board membership. Secret number 18. The 2016 Rockefeller Foundation divestment from fossil fuels was strategic reputation management timed after the family had already diversified their wealth into other sectors, not a genuine sacrifice for climate principles. The family spent a century extracting wealth from oil. They diversified into pharmaceuticals, technology, finance, and real estate. Once their wealth was safely distributed across the economy, they publicly divested from the industry that created their empire, generating positive press coverage for abandoning an investment they no longer needed. The pattern is identical to the philanthropy that followed Ludlow. Wait until the extraction is complete, then perform generosity for the cameras. Secret number 19. The Rockefeller family's population control initiatives, rebranded over decades under various names, have consistently promoted policies that reduce birth rates in developing nations while framing this agenda as women's health and family planning. From eugenics to population control to reproductive health, the underlying concern remains consistent: managing the number of people in the world, particularly in regions with resources that multinational corporations seek to extract. The language evolved to become more palatable. The institutional continuity remained unbroken. Your textbook celebrates family planning as progress. It doesn't mention who funded the framework or what their actual concerns were. Secret number 20. The architecture the Rockefellers built remains fully operational today, staffed by people trained in Rockefeller-funded institutions, guided by frameworks developed in Rockefeller-funded think tanks, operating through organizations the Rockefellers founded or shaped. The Federal Reserve still operates according to the 1913 framework designed at Jekyll Island. The Council on Foreign Relations still supplies foreign policy leadership. The foundations still fund the research that shapes public understanding. The universities still teach within parameters established by Rockefeller grants. The medical system still operates according to the Flexner Report model. The UN still meets on Rockefeller land. Nothing structural has changed in a century. Only the public's awareness has faded, exactly as intended. 20 secrets, all documented, all verifiable, all systematically excluded from the education you received. This isn't about whether the Rockefellers were good or evil. Moral judgments are distractions. This is about understanding that the institutions you trust, the frameworks you use to interpret the world, the range of ideas you consider legitimate, all of it was shaped by deliberate design. The Rockefellers didn't just accumulate wealth. They built a system designed to perpetuate itself across generations, regardless of which politicians hold office, which parties control government, or which personalities dominate the news. The system doesn't require the family's direct involvement anymore. It operates automatically, selecting for leaders who accept its premises, marginalizing those who question them, rewarding obedience and punishing deviation. You went to their schools. You read their textbooks. You absorb their frameworks. You learn to dismiss anyone who questions these institutions as paranoid or extreme. That dismissal reflex is the system's greatest achievement. It makes the architecture invisible by making it socially costly to notice. But you noticed today? You watched this far. You allowed yourself to consider information that conflicts with what you were taught. That's how it starts. One question leads to another. The pattern recognition begins. The architecture becomes visible, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. If you want to keep seeing, subscribe. Share this video. Start asking questions they never wanted you to ask. The truth isn't hidden. It's just expensive to notice. But you've already paid the price of attention. You might as well see what else is there.